Today we're here with Chris Miller, the creator of, and exactly how do you pronounce it? I keep saying Ankur.
It's pronounced Ankur.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So, Ankur. I've had it pronounced all kinds of different ways though, and I've quit correcting people. So, and if you, depending on what country you go to, because well, we can get into that later too, but the mythologies kind of transcend a lot of different cultures.
Sure.
It is pronounced Angkor in Thailand, for example, but the Hindus and the people of the Samaria and that sort of thing pronounced it Ankur.
Okay.
So
awesome. So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us about your background, other than creator of this game that we've been talking about or going to continue to talk about.
Well, my name's Chris Miller. I'm an independent game designer from Atlanta, Georgia. I've been playing role-playing games as long as I can remember. I think it was like 82 or 83 when I got started with D&D. I had always wanted to create a game of my own. I knew that when I was a kid, actually. I tried to, when I started delving into running my first games, I wanted to try to create my own systems and things as well. Although that never really quite worked out well back then. But, I live, like I said, locally here in Atlanta. My wife and I are both in the medical field,
Okay.
or at least I was until fairly recently. I was an optician by trade and repaired and, made eyeglasses for a living and did eye exams and that sort of thing. And I just, I got kind of burned out. I was in that for about, 12 or 15 years. And, I'm 45 now, so I'm hitting that, kind of a midlife crisis. And,
Right.
and I knew I wanted to do something else. And I had the gaming background to kind of fall back on. Early on, in the mid and late 80s, I worked for Dragon Con for about 10 years when that was first created. And Dragon Con is a pretty big convention for the Southeast. The local gaming store in College Park, where I used to live up there, they introduced me to D&D way back when, right? So when I was a kid, I was going up to that store every day. It was a comic book shop, and I was buying comics and miniatures and got into D&D. And I became, pretty well acquainted with the owner. I never worked for him when he had the comic book store, but he went on to create Dragon Con. His name was Pat Henry. And so, last year we had 85,000 people, so it's a huge, thing that goes on here. And, so I'd been acquainted with the gaming scene. I'd GM'd some games at Dragon Con before and was a GM with my own, local group and all that. And I said, well, whenever you're trying to start a business, you're always looking at, things that you're good at aside from your maybe your mundane chosen profession, right? So I've like I said, I fell back on gaming. Little did I know how hard it was going to be. I mean, honestly,
I can relate.
I had no idea the amount of knowledge I didn't have regarding this field. So, but I slugged through it, and it took. I know you guys talked about it in the other video. I did mention it in the book. It's been about a 10-year road for me, from concept to product, and it's a real thing now, and I can hardly believe it myself. Actually, it's still weird when I go places and occasionally I'll get people who want autographs and that sort of thing, and it's I'm just some schmuck that wrote a book,
But it's your vision. It's out in the world now. People see it. They can touch it. They can play. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, we're new to this scene as well. This content creation, and it's cool to be like we've met some people at a local game store. It's like, oh hey, I saw your videos. I'm like, really? That's awesome. So I totally get it. It's a fascinating thing, and it's wonderful, and it's definitely beats your day job.
for me, the thing that sold me on it was right after I'd done the Kickstarter. I was at a mall, and I saw somebody who I did not know wearing an Ankur T-shirt.
That's awesome.
And for me, that was, I was on the moon,
Yeah.
Just to see. Apparently, they had, obviously they had backed the Kickstarter, but yeah, it's like I said, it's a work in progress. I'm actually working on the first supplement to the game now.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm a little behind on that, but hopefully it'll be out in the next month or two. And we'll move on to other projects as well.
I get that, and it's con season, so
yeah. We've done 15 conventions in something like 6 or 8 months.
You going to Gen Con?
I am not going to Gen Con. I went to Origins, and Origins was so expensive. I kind of blew my wad on Origins, so I can't afford to go to Gen Con. But I'll be at Dragon Con. We'll be at Scarab Con. I'm going to, Ancient City Con in St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay.
We're doing a handful of smaller conventions in town, or locally, and then next year I'm looking at doing fewer conventions. Right now I'm working on trying to get more of the product in actual game stores,
right? So
that I don't have to travel as much, because it's just not feasible. I'm not rich or anything, so I have to have a regular job, and unfortunately, it really cuts into that. So, what I've been talking to Southern Hobby Distribution,
okay,
and Alliance and some other places, and we're trying to work out some deals now where that'll be they'll distribute the product into game stores without me having to, because right now I do a lot of consignment, and there's a lot of problems associated with that, obviously, because you have to travel for that.
Yeah.
And then I'm driving 50 miles or 100 miles to pick up $20 or something. So, I'd rather, instead of dealing with stores individually, I'd rather have the book in catalogs so that they can order,
Sure.
And it's in Barnes and Noble. But, Barnes and Noble is just not a place people go specifically with it in mind to buy games,
right?
Necessarily. So my sales through them have not been great,
Sure.
But so right now it's mostly digital and convention scene.
So you talked about Kickstarter, and you had a successful Kickstarter, which is always great to hear. Especially, there's a lot of folks out there that want to get into this. They have products. They probably have great products that we've just never heard of. Mm-hmm. Great stories, great modules, great own games. Do you have any insight on them as far as, kind of what was the experience other than, I'm sure it was teeth gritting. Very exciting.
Yeah. It's a roller coaster of emotion. I'll tell you that. I've actually had 2 successful Kickstarters.
Oh, wow.
With this game because of the supplement as well.
Mm.
And I don't want to say I chalked it all up to luck. I did my research, and I think the best thing that people can do is actually, Kickstarter puts out many videos on how to run successful Kickstarters, and I would say go ahead and take the time and actually watch all those tutorials. They do make a lot of really good points, and even though some of it's not specific to your product, a lot of it is, and there's certain algorithms that you have to keep in mind, and you pretty much have to reach between 10 and 20% of your funding within the first 48 hours or something.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is not by just putting the product out there and hoping people go to not YouTube, Kickstarter that day and see it. You need to do a lot of advertising ahead of time. You need to already have kind of a fan base built up. that know about the Kickstarter before it happens. And that's probably the biggest thing that you can do. Also, your Kickstarter it almost has to have a video. I struggled with that too, because I'm not great on camera and I'm not tech savvy in any kind of way. But I downloaded Wondershare Filmora, and I learned real quick how to use that to edit videos. And I made my videos with that, and you can tell that they're amateurish, but I think that they're way better than nothing, for sure.
Yeah.
And you don't want your videos to be more than really about a minute, maybe 3 minutes, because after that, people aren't going to watch it. They're not going to pay attention.
Right.
So you got to have, that fan base. You want to get a video. It's got to be clear and concise, and use as much artwork or anything like that you can do for to kind of grab them. If you can do a short demo of the game, if that's possible, with card games or something maybe like that. With a role-playing game, it's not, in my opinion, it's not possible to do a full demo of a RPG on Kickstarter.
It's difficult. It's very difficult to do.
Even if you cut the heck out of it, you'd be 20 minutes in or something, but and just keep plugging at it. You gotta promote your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work for you. You've got to every day post on Twitter, post on Instagram, post on Facebook, and but there's a fine line to that too, because you don't want to overburden your friend list or whatever, with spamming them with all this stuff. Yeah. And I had to, at first I had a couple of friends of mine that were like, dude, you gotta lay off a little bit. I'm seeing a message, every 4 hours or something on your thing. And that was mainly because I was posting to other sites that they were
sure
that they liked,
Yeah.
But it's a real fickle field to get into. So, for every game that funds, there's 100 games that don't. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about Kickstarter is, if it fails, you don't have to spend any money,
right?
And you can do it again,
right?
And I had a card game that I did a Kickstarter for, and it did not fund.
Oh, okay.
So, it was called Collusion.
Okay.
And it's a political satire card game where you play a presidential candidate vying for office. And it's a very tongue-in-cheek, very irreverent card game, a lot like Cards Against Humanity or something like that. And I just, I don't know if I didn't market it well, but everybody who plays it loves it.
Uh-huh.
But it's one of those things where when I show it to people, they're like, "Oh, I've never heard of this," so. Anyway. So I did that. It hasn't done well so far, but then again, I've been mostly spending my time, pushing Ankur, Kingdom of the Gods.
So how did this come about? Was it a home campaign in a different system? Like, were you playing another game and you just kind of played in this world, this setting, or is it brand new? Did you create it from scratch using?
No, I created it from scratch. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So what I did is, going back like 10 years ago, I was a big fan of the whole ancient aliens theory. I had Eric von Daniken's book and Zachariah Sitchin and that kind of stuff, right? And I had read those and was fascinated by that. And when the Ancient Aliens TV show came out, I watched it religiously, right? Well, of course, I was also a gamer. And so the gamer side of me, was saying, I love, all these ancient world mythologies are interesting. And what if any of that was true? Even if a fraction of that was true, what kind of a world would that have been to have lived in, and what kind of adventures could a person go on, and that sort of thing. So as I started thinking more and more about that, I remember writing down, dozens of notes on cocktail napkins and things like that, just scratch paper, and I'd put it on the back burner and hope to get back to it. And I think originally I was really, like you had said, I was just kind of thinking of a setting for a D&D game, I had met a friend of mine who, he had a series of websites, and this was still in the 90s, or late 90s, early 2000s, probably. And by the time that he had passed away shortly before I started writing the book, but right before he had passed away, I'd kind of worked for him. I was like a Kato Kalin figure, if you will. And so he was a self-made millionaire, and he had this huge mansion in Atlanta. And basically my job was to live at his mansion and watch it and take care of the place.
Okay.
So, yeah, tough job,
yeah.
But
sounds awful.
But he was also a really big fan of the Ancient Alien show, and he played D&D and stuff as well. And so we started to have more and more conversations about this, and he suggested, even back then, that in the near future it might be possible to start printing books, through digital on-demand kind of stuff, print on demand. And lo and behold, that did happen, And so if it really weren't for him pushing me in that direction and telling me that I could start a business of my own and be successful and that sort of a thing, and use the internet to do that, I don't know that I would have gotten into this full swing, But then, like I said a while back, I had this collection of a stack of notes and stuff that I'd written about this setting. And, I said, well, why don't I take a crack at it and really start making something out of this,
Yeah.
And also years ago, I was, you go back to like it was 1999. I took a trip to India. And I spent 2 weeks in Europe backpacking around, and then I backpacked in India for 3 months.
Right on.
And when I was there, I was fascinated by the mythologies and the histories and just the culture. And these people were telling me that it wasn't even science fiction, but like part of their real world beliefs are that all of the ancient gods were aliens from another world, and I'm just like, well, it's exactly what Eric von Daniken was saying, Yeah. And then, I was a history major as well in college, and I remember reading a lot about the Sumerians, and so I also went back on a lot of that and kind of brushed up on what I'd learned, and it was just fascinating stuff. So I thought, what the heck, it'll make a really good setting for a game.
Yeah.
And it snowballed into 332 pages.
No, it's a great game. It's really interesting. And I hope you don't get offended, but it really, I get to play Stargate. Like, it really gives me some awesome rules to play Stargate. I doubt that was the intention, but it does fall on that same Chariot of the Gods.
Right.
That theory.
And I'm a big fan of Stargate too. So I don't take that as I don't take any offense to it. I did not actively think about Stargate when I made the game, but it totally works.
But there's a staff. Are you sure?
Weapons, sir? We can figure out how they operate.
Well, and I actually had somebody tell me that it was a lot like Battlefield Earth.
Oh God!
And
no, Battlefield.
At first, at first I was horrified. Right, it was such a terrible movie. I just, but I also own the book, and the book is much better than the movie.
Okay.
And I can see a lot of elements that are similar. There's some John Carter from Mars in there. Some, I was a big fan of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and that kind of thing too. And so I didn't want it. I knew right off the bat, I didn't want it to be campy.
Right.
I wanted to take a very serious sci-fi approach to it, as though this were real.
Sure.
I remember Zeb Cook, I think it was, wrote the old box set of Conan that TSR put out back in '83 or something. I remember reading that, and it was the character creation book was written as though these were they were notes that were from an anthropologist that had been found in the 1920s and describing a real world that it had existed, and
very cool.
So it was kind of a neat take on it, and I decided to do something very similar with Ankur. I wanted to really blend the mythology and realism so that it was almost indistinguishable.
So why the D12? When you sat
well,
down and you said, hey, there's a D20 system that works great. There's a D100 system that works well. I'm going to try something new. Is it just to try something new? Was that the goal with it?
So going back again to the very beginnings of this, I decided I wanted it to be a D20 system.
Okay.
And D20 at the time had just come up for open license,
mm-hmm.
right? And everybody and their uncle was making a D20 game.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I've got this setting. Let me just throw these rules onto it, and bada bing, bada boom, there you go. I've got a game. And I found that there were lots of things I actually didn't like with the D20 system, and so I said, well, it's my game. I'll start making house rules, and I'll take things out, here and there. And as I was doing that, it became like a game of Jenga, and everything just fell apart, and so then I said, well, I had a friend of mine that was, he was creating a game as well, and he had used the D20 system. And even though Wizards of the Coast had put D20 up for open license, they had just been purchased by Hasbro. And Hasbro reneged on the deal and said that they weren't, at that time, they weren't going to honor the license the way that Watt had written it.
I'm trying to remember when that was, when they bought.
So
because it's right before 4th edition, wasn't it? When Hasbro
right.
bought them. Okay.
And because they wanted to come out with this new game, and they apparently early on, some of the rules that they were going to incorporate, that they knew they were going to incorporate in 4th edition, were still under the open license. And so they said, well, nothing that's going to be in our new book can be open license. And so they started actually suing people. So I had a friend of mine that got a cease and desist on his game, and so he had to pull copies and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
And I said, I'm not going through that. So I'm going to make my own system, no matter what it ends up being, right?
Safe bet.
And so I said, well, maybe I can still work with a D20. And I played around with that. And I can't recall all the reasons now. This is almost 10 years back, right? But for whatever reason, I decided that I didn't want to use a D20. I did think about D10. I tried a D8. I tried 2D6. And actually the one that really stuck and it worked and it was mathematically sound and fit, it did everything I wanted it to do. It was a D12. And so it wasn't any conscious choice. It was just I was kind of going through all the dice and seeing what worked and what didn't.
What felt better?
D12 worked for me. And then, when I was doing my early play test, and I was on a lot of blog sites too, posting about the game, asking questions, and trying to get a feel for what the younger generation of gamers wanted. A lot of them said they didn't like rolling dice at all. And some of them said that they don't like that there's 7 different dice, and I kept getting that a lot though, actually. And so,
Okay.
I'm old school and I like dice. I mean, I don't
all the
like
dice.
I don't want my game to be completely narrative driven, although, it's almost to that now. But I said, well, I think I can manage doing every single mechanic on just one D12. And I did. I was right. So, and I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it. It doesn't. I don't think that there's a huge need for multiple. I mean, I know some people that they love games that have dice pools. I want to roll 20 D6 or something. I don't really have a preference either way. I think some of those games are fun. So but
sure.
With I guess now that I think about it, another reason I settled on a lower die than D20 was that in D&D, for example, I always thought the stat range was really ridiculous. You've got stats between 1 and 18,
right? But
the only stats that really matter that give you a bonus were 15 to 20 or something, right? So
right.
Or really for a character, unless you're some kind of god, it's 15 to 18 really. So you're only getting bonuses for the top handful of numbers. So I said, well, I used to play Star Wars D6 back in the day, the West End game one, right? Mm-hmm. And I really loved that their stats were lower numbers, and they even did that. Well, they did that with the new Star Wars. The old one was you had different numbers of D6 that you could roll, but so I said, well, I'm going to make my stat range 1 to 5 and just have below average, average, and then a couple of different bonuses. And again, when you've got a small stat range like that, and the way that I'd worked weapon damage, where you don't actually roll for weapon damage, it's based on the toughness of an item.
Right.
I just didn't. I didn't need a D20.
At the end of the day, in every D20 system, you could actually take that number and throw it away. It's only that +0, +1, 2, 3, 4 that matter. If they wanted to, they could simplify the system drastically by doing just that, simplifying, getting rid of that, and just saying, okay, well, a dragon has a +7 strength, or has a 7 strength, and a human has a 0 strength, or -1 strength, or whatever it may be. So I get that, especially when it comes to trying to simplify rules for newer folks. And I think your game hits a really good sweet spot right now, as far as narrative-driven games that are simple to play, but can be complex if you want them to be. So games like Cypher, Numenera, those kinds of things. It's a huge push for narrative right now. So you're in a good spot.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's just, well, I think games in general, over the last 20 years or so, but just been following almost a predictable kind of a path. I know you guys had mentioned before that my game was similar to Cypher, and I've actually never played Cypher, but I'm aware of it, right? And I also my rules were very similar to the Cortex system early on, and I know Jamie Chambers, and so he wrote the Cortex system, and it wasn't until I was going to show him my system that I saw his system and read it, and I was like, oh crap, it's the same thing, But I had never played his game, and it's interesting though that when you're trying to go from A to Z, there's only so many ways you can do it. Right. And so a lot of designers end up coming up with the same ideas without knowing it.
Sure.
And so I've changed my system several times before published it. But yeah, it's I think, like you had said, I think narrative games are becoming a lot more popular. And when you've got stuff like Critical Role and stuff like that on the internet being so popular now,
yeah,
we're getting a lot of 20-somethings that are now getting into D&D for the first time.
Yes.
And they're looking for other games, and board gaming in particular is really big right now too. But what I've noticed is, all the gaming groups that are at the store near me, they're mostly young kids. It's usually their first experience with a game or something like that, and they want to play, but they're not as thrilled as the older guys are with like number crunching and that sort of thing. So I don't want to use the term dumb it down because it's a little disrespectful, but I see a pattern where a lot of the games are just simpler styles of play, and it's like they throw out everything but the kitchen sink and just it tends to be very narrative driven now.
I was actually really upset with Wizards because the way that they had sold 5th edition as part of the playtest was, hey, this is going to be a game where someone who really likes the crunch and someone like myself and someone like my wife who just wants that kit and just sit down and play can play together and work it out. And that was not the case. There is no crunch to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, no matter how much people want to argue with me. You got like 5-6 feats to choose from, 6 classes, and there's no choice. There's really no choice in the game. I was happy to see that Pathfinder 2nd edition is not backing down. They're sticking to their crunchy roots, and they're proud of their crunch.
Well, and right now they're the only people doing it.
Yes.
So I think that's their niche. For everybody who was happy with 3.0 or 3.5, I mean, they all pretty much jumped on the Pathfinder bandwagon.
Right.
I don't know. I got a little upset when fourth edition came out, and I got a little upset when 5th edition came out. But I mean, look, it's a company, it's a business.
They have to evolve.
I know why they're doing what they're doing, and they're trying to change their demographic. I don't think that they're totally disinvesting in the over 40 population.
Right.
They're not Star Wars, but
Zing.
Yeah. But I do see that a little bit. I mean, I know they're trying to rebrand a little bit, and hey, if Pathfinder is going to pick up the slack on that, then that's fine. I mean, I really don't get into arguments over that kind of stuff. To be honest, I've been so focused on my own game for the better part of 5 years here. I haven't played much anything, else. So
I understand.
We
we've been so busy with this, we don't get to play games anymore. Yeah.
My wife and I play board games and stuff. She actually doesn't like role-playing games. But we played board games and stuff a couple of nights a week, and we have a lot of fun doing that. And, that's another thing I would recommend people do if they're at all thinking about being a game designer, is play as many games as you can. Even if you don't necessarily like the game, you're not into that setting or whatever genre that it's in, you'll be very surprised, I think, to find that there are some rules and mechanics and stuff that you might pick up that really kind of stick in your mind and could work well with your own game. I mean,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There are plenty of games that I've played that I absolutely hated, but I thought had some really neat mechanics. And that goes for video games, board games, role-playing games, any game really, that it's like, oh man, that was really neat, but that was an awful game. But it was the one thing that I liked about it. So I agree. Right. There's some good stuff out there. Our biggest thing that we tend to harp on around here is that there are a lot of other games out there in the world, and to give them a shot. My experience, I guess, has been a little bit opposite of that, is that Wizards has done such a good job of creating a culture with these new players that they don't want to try anything else. If you go to a lot of forums and you're like, what you see is them trying to homebrew games that already exist. Like, I want to play a game that's all about werewolves, and we're all werewolves in this futuristic society. I'm like, well, there's a game for that. It's called Werewolf.
Right.
Not the card game, but the old one, or Vampire the Masquerade, or these games exist.
I play tested Vampire, by the way back in the day. So.
Wow.
It was like 1990, I think.
Did you have your makeup on and your trench coat and hanging out in the back alley?
No, but in Atlanta, we have there's an old club. It's been here. It's still here, but it's been there forever. It's a club called the Masquerade. And we did a live action role play of Vampire the Masquerade at the Masquerade.
Okay. And
the idea was that you weren't supposed to tell anyone that you were role playing. So you're in an atmosphere. It's a three level club, right? 200 people in there or something, right? And there's about 15 or 20 of us playing vampires and some vampire hunters. And not only did we not know who the other players were, but you had to keep this persona the entire time. So as you're interacting with regular people, you're your character,
right?
And it was kind of a fun experience. Back then, though, I didn't like the combat rules. It was the rock paper scissors kind of thing, And
looks silly in the club, rock paper scissors.
Right. And people are like, "What the heck is he doing?"
It's for the next drink. Don't judge me.
But yeah, that's another thing too. I just want to say, back in the old days, there were, I can't even name how many games I used to play. It was hundreds. There were, behind me here, I've still got, it was probably 200 games on the shelf over here. And there were so many different systems, and everything was so unique, And by the time the 2000s came around, everybody, all these big conglomerates bought everybody out.
Right.
So everything's D20, I like the fact that role-playing is coming back. It's more popular now.
Yes.
But with a caveat to that is role-playing is not popular. D&D is popular.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for somebody like me who's created a new system, right? And I want to get new people to play this. And you would think it's the right time. But it's actually very difficult to get people off the D&D bandwagon,
We could focus solely on Dungeons & Dragons this channel. We have a set, we have great crew, we have high production, and we could do well. But we choose not to specifically just because of that. There's too many other people out there with too many other good games that need to be brought in at least a little bit of light that we can shed right now. And I think you're right. Role playing is not necessarily popular. It's Dungeons and Dragons, and it's hopefully that will spread soon.
Well, they've done a great marketing job,
Well, what they need is a 6th edition, so it'll piss off all the 5th edition players, and then they'll start looking elsewhere. Because it'll happen.
Now, if I could just get Critical Role to start playing Ankur,
Yeah,
that's what it's at.
There you go. There are tons of podcasters and live play out now. Honestly, more than I ever thought existed until I got into this and went out there. Everybody on Twitter is like, I've got live play this and live play that. Have you reached out to anybody to try to sell them your game a bit? And
yeah, well, I don't know. I've sent it out to probably a dozen YouTube reviewers, a couple of which have done videos, much like yourselves. I have tried to get it into, there's some different guilds and whatnot for game designers where I call them guilds. Essentially, it's you've got groups that will pool their resources.
Oh, okay.
Purchase tables at conventions, and then set your product on conventions, and you don't have to attend, and then they'll run your games as well.
Cool.
You have to pay them. I've had a little bit of success with that, but being kind of a small fish in a big pond, it's I've already spent something like $25,000 on this game. So I'm running out of resources to do that. And, the concept of paying somebody $100 to run your game, every time there's a convention,
right.
Can get a little pricey,
Sure.
So I don't know if you've got any other suggestions. I would certainly appreciate it.
I'm swimming in a big pond too. I mean, we're in the same spot.
Other than I've gone to every convention conceivable, right? Everything that I could afford to go to. I've run, probably 50 or 60 demos at different stores and things like that. I've got the book on consignment at stores. I've got reviewers on YouTube and Twitter and things like that have done some stuff for me. But I'd like to do more. So I actually just finished a billboard campaign. So I purchased 26 billboards across the country and plastered Ankur, Kingdom of the Gods on it.
Okay.
For all to see. So I'm still waiting to kind of see what's going to come of that, if any.
Yeah.
But
you could do like The Room. Just put your real number on there, and then people will call you.
Right. So you said The Room?
Yeah, The Room. Have you ever seen The Room?
Yeah. So I'm friends with Tommy. I'm friends with Tommy Wiseau, actually.
No shit.
Yeah. So I got a buddy of mine that came up with an idea for a disaster artist board game. And so I talked to Tommy 2 days ago about it, and he seemed somewhat enthusiastic, but at the same time, he doesn't want to handle the business side of it.
Sure.
So he's kind of pushed us off on one of his agents, and this guy's he's wanting a lot of money, so we'll see.
Tommy wants a lot of money, or?
Well,
I'm
going to say it's. Yeah, he's got like a handler that does it, and so apparently he's made up a contract that's standard contract for stuff like that, and he wants $25,000 up front. And
wow, just for
so. I don't know.
We'll see. I'll tell you what. If you make it, I'll buy it because that sounds awesome.
Reconsider, yeah. But anyway, So my wife and I run the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the live cast here in Atlanta.
Okay. And
we've been doing that for 16 years, and so the theater where we do that also plays The Room, and sure. I used to host the Room. And so we would heckle the movie and all that, and so Tommy's come to the theater like 3 times.
Oh wow!
And he was nice enough to we did some photo ops and went out and got something to eat at the diner, and he's actually a very interesting, well-spoken guy. Okay. When you get to know him, but he comes across really odd at first, but yeah. So
I've talked to a lot of gamers. They come off odd at first too. So, I mean, that's how it is. So, yeah. Before we let you go, we always do the part. What do you have in the fire right now? What are you cooking? What's coming up that you would like to share with folks?
Well,
that you can.
So I've got So currently I'm working on a campaign supplement for Ankur.
Okay.
It's based on the continent of Mundwazi within the game. It's basically it's Africa. Mm-hmm. And so I'm detailing all of the different city states and cultures, and there's some new species you can play. There are some new creatures and things like that, and some new abilities that'll come into play.
Sure.
After that, in the future, I already have plans to come out with supplements for too many supplements, actually. There's a supplement for the underwater civilizations that the aliens have created. So there's like underwater gold mining and stuff going on.
Okay.
There's also I'm going to have a supplement on the hollow Earth theory. There's a supplement that's going to be dealing with outer space travel, space combat, Mars and the moon. There are bases on both of those. I'd like to, if I can keep the ball rolling on all this stuff, I'd like to detail other continents or subcontinents like India and Asia, the Americas and Mesoamerica. And then there's been talk, I've got a couple of other ideas for card games and possibly a board game.
Okay.
I don't want to say too much about those right now. They're in the very early planning stages, so nothing conclusive on that. But since board games and card games are way more popular, I think it's an easier way to kind of connect with gamers and with a new audience, and so there may be an Ankur version of either a card game or a board game or both.
Okay.
Coming out.
That'd be cool.
Something that, for people that don't necessarily want to delve right into tabletop role playing, if they're more comfortable with a board game or something like that, but it'll still deal with, this kind of managing the city states and shipping gold to the aliens and that sort of thing. So
that'd be awesome.
I don't know.
I kind of like the idea as you're talking about these, kind of sticking to those conspiracy theories a little bit.
Yeah.
The underwater city, the moon base.
Sure.
I think that's really cool. So, Chris, thank you very much for coming on the show. I wish we could see you at Gen Con, but I understand why.